Welcome to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 132 of the podcast. And in this edition of the podcast, I'm talking about one of the most curious trades in NBA history. The Washington Wizards and Houston Rockets have swapped their max star point guards, Russell Westbrook and John Wall. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I know a lot of people do, so let's get right into it. The biggest reason this trade went down is because both point guards are unhappy with their situation. First off, Russell Westbrook is unhappy with the Houston Rockets. He thinks that their ownership are going in a different direction and no longer competing for championships. This offseason, they traded away Robert Covington to the Portland Trail Blazers, and they no longer seem willing to spend a lot of money because they have so many guys under max contracts, Harden, Westbrook, and now John Wall. So they were looking to unload some of that money and not give up more money, because I think the Houston Rockets ownership is actually being realistic that this team is not built to compete for a championship. The small ball Daryl Morey solution did not work for them. So it is time for the Houston Rockets to go in a different direction. The problem is Russell Westbrook did not want to be part of that direction, and he wanted out of the team. And the biggest problem is that their real superstar, James Harden, also reportedly wants out of Houston. So I think these moves are to appease James Harden and to appease Russell Westbrook. And then you get to John Wall, who has been injured for most of the past 2 seasons and hasn't played any basketball in that time period. And he reportedly wants out of the Washington Wizards because he's no longer thought of as their star player. They have moved on to Bradley Beal, and we all know about the conflict between John Wall and Bradley Beal. The whose team is it conundrum. Well, guess what? It's now Bradley Beal's team, and Russell Westbrook is just going to be a part of it. That's what I think their solution was. And thank the heavens that the Wizards finally made a choice. They picked Bradley Beal over John Wall. That's all I've been asking for. Whether or not they picked John Wall or Bradley Beal, I wasn't going to be mad. They at least picked somebody, and that means something to me. They picked Bradley Beal. He's their star now. The most fascinating thing about this trade is that 2 contracts that were thought to be unmovable were traded for each other. Russell Westbrook and John Wall each have 3 years remaining on their super max contracts. They will each be making about $44 million a year in that time period, and most of the NBA and its fans thinks that those are 2 of the worst contracts in the NBA because Russell Westbrook has become one of the worst shooters in the league. I know the guy is a triple-double machine. He averaged a triple-double 2 of the last 3 seasons. And by the way, he almost put up triple-double numbers last season. I get it. The guy is a beast when it comes to that. He's also a great competitor. We think of him in that Kobe way. Like, all he wants to do is win basketball games. But his real issue is he is one of the worst three-point shooters in a league where that has become way more dominant. And I kind of find it ironic that the Houston Rockets, a team that heavily relies on the three-point shot, thought that it was going to be a good fit for Russell Westbrook. He shot 26% from free, and I say about the average NBA player needs to shoot about 35 for me to be able to let you take the regular amount of three-point shots that Russell Westbrook takes. His three-point shot is getting worse as more teams are beginning to rely on that shot. Think of the other point guards in this league that are dominating it with the three-point shot. Harden has become one of the better three-point shooters. Even though he takes a massive amount of threes, he still makes enough where it's worth that he takes that amount. The issue with Russell Westbrook is he takes a huge amount of them, and they're not going in at the rate in which he's taking them. So that's why I think the Houston Rockets are probably more willing to move on from Westbrook. I don't think this is just because he demanded a trade. I think it's because he's not a great fit with the Rockets. And then the issue with John Wall, of course, is the injuries. This is a guy whose game heavily relied on speed. Is John Wall even going to be half as fast coming back from these injuries? And you look at the other move that the Houston Rockets have made, the other significant move is they brought in John Wall's former college teammate, DeMarcus Cousins. That's a cool story in all this, and if this were on 2015, the Houston Rockets would probably be favored to win the championship because they'd have John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, and James Harden? Well, the problem is it's not 2015, and you don't know what you're going to get out of either of those players. It's a nice story, but I'm not sure it's really going to work out. I think I like John Wall as a point guard more so than most other NBA fans. I think he's one of the better passers. I think he's underrated defensively. I think when he's healthy, of course he's worth that max contract. But this really has a chance to be a disaster if he doesn't recover and shows signs of being the John Wall I grew up watching and falling in love with. I think he needs to show signs of being that John Wall, or this could be a disaster for the Rockets. I think the biggest reason to make this trade for me is to see if these point guards fit better with those star players. First, with the Wizards, see if Russell Westbrook can fit well with Bradley Beal, because John Wall certainly did not. Again, there was a whose team was a conundrum. I don't think there will be that with Russell Westbrook. Again, Westbrook has worked well with other superstars recently. Paul George, James Harden, I think he worked really well. And again, the biggest issue with Russell Westbrook when he played with Kevin Durant is that everyone thought he was taking way too many shots ahead of Durant, and I don't think that's a major issue. He played really well with Paul George, and he played kind of well with James Harden at times. He was better at deferring to those other stars when they were playing better than him, and I think going into this, he knows this is Bradley Beal's team, so I think this does have a chance to be a good fit at first for the regular season. My biggest issue with Russell Westbrook is during the postseason. I think he can get his teams to the postseason. I wouldn't be shocked if the Washington Wizards were the 6th, 7th, or 8th seed in the East. What I would be shocked is if they could get out of the first round, because that's where Russell Westbrook-led teams have struggled. He was able to get out of the first round last year with James Harden, but I don't think with Bradley Beal and the Wizards, that's going to happen. And then with the Rockets, as good as James Harden is, his partnerships with other superstars have failed. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, but look at the resume. Dwight Howard, at first they went through this honeymoon phase where we thought that was one of the better big man guard duos. That didn't last. Then you get Chris Paul, and you think, wow, this is really one of the better guard duos. They fit way better than we all thought. They went through a honeymoon phase. They almost made it to the NBA Finals. That didn't last. Then they swapped Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook, a guy that Harden played with in OKC, and we all thought they were best friends, and then that didn't last, and now he gets John Wall. I don't think that this is going to be better than those other duos, but I think John Wall could fit better with James Harden than Russell Westbrook, because I think John Wall is a better passer, and I think John Wall is a better shooter than Russell Westbrook when he is healthy. I mean, these are these teams' last chances to please their superstar players. The Wizards are at risk of losing Bradley Beal because maybe he wants to be the second wheel to a team like the Lakers. This is the last chance for the Wizards to prove that Bradley Beal is a building piece that can be part of a winning team that he wants to be a part of. So you give him Russell Westbrook and you hope it plays out well. And the same thing for James Harden. James Harden is talking about wanting to join the Nets with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. This is the Rockets' last chance to make James Harden happen. And it's interesting that the answers seem to be John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. I think a lot of basketball people don't think that's going to work out, but it's a Hail Mary attempt. Both of them are to please their superstar players and want them to stay with their franchise. It's trying to make them happy. And another thing why this trade is so polarizing is because these are the two most criticized point guards of their era. We've criticized John Wall for being a bad leader and not making things work out with him and Beal. We've criticized Russell Westbrook from taking shots away from Kevin Durant, a generational talent. We think Westbrook is a ball hog who is chasing the triple-double. We've gone back and forth on both of these players. I mean, sometimes we act like Russell Westbrook didn't win an MVP, that it never happened. I mean, there are some people that have never liked Russell Westbrook's game, and the same thing for John Wall. We act like he wasn't at one point the best point guard in the Eastern Conference. I think you can make a case that there was a point in time where Westbrook was the best point guard in the West and John Wall was the best point guard in the East. And now they're at the point in their career where we're doubting both of them. I think more people are doubting John Wall, but I don't think anybody really thinks this is a great fit for Westbrook and the Wizards. I think the consensus is that Westbrook is going to go to the Wizards, put up a bunch of big numbers, they'll maybe make the postseason, and then there'll be an early exit from the playoffs. I think that's what most people are expecting. I think that's what I'm expecting. I think Russell Westbrook needs to do everything in his power to make that not from happening. I think he needs to be more of a team player when it comes to the Washington Wizards. I think this needs to be more about helping Bradley Beal be the best two guard in the Eastern Conference and making it so that your team has a chance to get out of the first round and proving that you have a lot left in the tank. I mean, you cannot shoot that amount of 3-point shots and shoot 26% from free. I think Russell Westbrook needs to, again, only attack the paint because he is one of the best when it comes to that. This guy is one of the best dunking point guards I've ever seen. He's explosive. He needs to get to that and stop taking jump shots at an alarming rate. It's also interesting to point out that the head coach of the Washington Wizards is Scott Brooks, the guy who coached Russell Westbrook for a long time with the Oklahoma City Thunder, so he did get the best out of Russell Westbrook. But that was the Russell Westbrook who was playing under Kevin Durant. Scott Brooks was not there when Russell Westbrook became the triple-double machine. As for John Wall, I like this fit better because if he's healthy, all he's being asked to do is to be the floor general of the Houston Rockets. And I think it's, again, just to alleviate pressure from James Harden. And I think John Wall is capable of doing that. I don't think he's the best scoring point guard in the league, but I think he's way more efficient than Russell Westbrook, and I think he'll be a better fit. I also like the fact that the Rockets are giving up on their small ball lineup. They signed a big man in Christian Wood, who was really good with the Pistons last year, and they signed DeMarcus Cousins. I have no idea if DeMarcus Cousins is going to be any good, but if he can get back to anything that he was with the Pelicans, that would be great for the Houston Rockets. And maybe the Houston Rockets could be the surprise team in the West. You still have James Harden, and if he's motivated to still be a member of the Rockets, which I have no idea, then I think they have a pretty good chance to be a top 5 seed in the West. I don't think that's that inconceivable because it's James Harden, and I think John Wall will respect James Harden way more than he respected Bradley Beal. I think it's inarguable that John Wall has way more to prove than Russell Westbrook, and that's why I weirdly like this from the Houston Rockets side way more than I like it from the Washington Wizards side. Again, I think for the Wizards, this is a last-second attempt to get Bradley Beal to stay with you long-term. For the Rockets, it's the same thing with Harden, but you might be able to get something out of John Wall that's unexpected. I think he has a lot to prove. Again, this is a guy who I thought was once the best point guard in the Eastern Conference. I think he has a lot to prove. For Westbrook, in a weird way, I almost doubt that he's going to try to fix his issues. I don't see Russell Westbrook really taking that much of a lesser role with the Wizards. I'm not sure if he's going to stop taking an alarmingly amount of 3-point shots. Again, you cannot take that amount of threes and shoot 26% from the floor. I'm not sure Russell Westbrook is at the point of his career where he's got something to prove. I think he thinks that he's one of the better point guards in the league, and the stats kind of back that up. He went 27 points, 7 assists, and 7 rebounds last year. Those are pretty jarring numbers, but I think when the fan looks at it, they want more from Russell Westbrook, but I think Russell Westbrook needs to want more from himself, and I'm not sure he's at that point of his career. But John Wall is at the point of his career where this could be his last chance to prove he's still one of the best point guards in the league. So from that standpoint, I actually like this more from the Houston Rockets perspective than the Washington Wizards. I will say it's a fair criticism to look at the Houston Rockets and question their continuity. Maybe they should still have Chris Paul on that roster because I think he was way better than people expected him to be last year. And the same can be said for Clint Capella. Maybe they moved on from some of those players way too soon. But from where they are, I think this is a pretty good last attempt to make James Harden happy and want to be a member of the Houston Rockets. I don't hate it from where we're at. Like, I don't think they could have just brought back the same team. I don't think Russell Westbrook and James Harden is a perfect duo. They're both really good players. They're both headed towards the Hall of Fame, but I don't think that duo was ever going to make it to, say, a Western Conference Finals. And I'm not sure that a John Wall, James Harden duo Rondo will either. I just think that fits better for me. John Wall is a real point guard. He's a better passer. He's a really good defender at times. I think he's a better fit with what the Rockets need. And again, he's just a better three-point shooter. You can't argue that he is. And I think it's fair to point out that there are a lot of NBA fans that are happy their teams didn't make this trade. I think there are a lot of teams happy that Russell Westbrook isn't a member of their team and that John Wall isn't a member of their team. These are these players that are way past their prime, that have a lot of money coming to them. If John Wall is only half as good as he was with the Wizards, he won't be worth $44 million a year. I think that's a fair point. But considering where he is, I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think it could be a good fit for the Houston Rockets. And they needed to make some kind of move. They were desperate, so this is the move that they made. Again, I understand all points of this trade, that a lot of people are like, I don't want the triple-double chaser in Westbrook on my team, and I don't want the injury-riddled John Wall on my team, because I think both of these players are kind of washed up. I understand that perspective, but I think there could be something left in the tank for John Wall because he's got something to prove. And sports, I love a comeback, and John Wall could be one of the best comebacks in recent NBA history. I'll also point out that this would have been way better for John Wall if Mike D'Antoni was still the head coach of the Houston Rockets, because he revolutionizes point guards when he gets them. Again, he made Steve Nash a two-time MVP. Look at what he did with James Harden. Look at what he did with Chris Paul. Those guys all played insanely well under D'Antoni, and John Wall probably could have benefited from having a head coach like Mike D'Antoni, but alas, that didn't happen. They moved on from D'Antoni, and we'll see what they can get out of John Wall, but I like this trade more for the Houston Rockets than the Washington Wizards. I might be in the minority on that one, but I think there could be something left in the tank for John Wall and the Houston Rockets. More so because I have more faith in James Harden than I do in Bradley Beal. I think the Houston Rockets attempt to keep Harden on the Rockets as their best player, I'm okay with, because I think James Harden is the best scorer of his generation. For me, Bradley Beal is one of these guys who can score 30 points on a bad team, but I'm not sure I want him to be my best player on a team competing for the postseason. I just don't think Bradley Beal is there. I think he would be great as a second or third wheel with a bunch of superstars. Like if I put him on the Lakers with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, they'd be winning championships for the next 5 years. But I don't think he is ready to be the best player on a team competing for a playoff spot. And I think he'll have the same issues with Russell Westbrook as James Harden did. The Wizards are going to ask Bradley Beal to do all the three-point shooting, and Russell Westbrook's not going to be efficient enough to help them late in the games. I'm not sure how this trade is going to affect either of their legacies. I just think John Wall has more to prove, and he knows he has more to prove, where I think Russell Westbrook knows we think of him as an all-time great, and even the people that criticize him, I think he ignores that, and he thinks of himself as a great player. So I always take the guy who has way more to prove, and in this case, in this point in time, John Wall has way more to prove than Russell Westbrook. Again, John Wall has been called the worst contract in the NBA for the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's got a lot to prove that he's not that, and I think he's hearing all the noise, and he's going to try to play his best basketball. And with James Harden by his side, I'm going to take that over Russell Westbrook, who I think is just going to do the same thing he did with the OKC Thunder and the same thing he did with the Houston Rockets. He's going to put up impressive stats, but at the end of the day, they're going to look kind of hollow because his team's not going to have a huge amount of success. That's my point of view on things. Again, I don't know if I'm in the minority or in the majority on this one, but I think there could be something left for John Wall, and he's got a lot to prove, so I like this trade for the Houston Rockets. Who knows? Both of these might be disastrous fits. Russell Westbrook still might be the stat guy, and the Wizards don't make the postseason. John Wall might not ever recover from that injury, but from my point of view right now, I like this trade for the Houston Rockets. It's a trade they needed to make. Again, from a continuity standpoint, I think it's fair to criticize the Houston Rockets. Again, maybe Chris Paul should still be on this roster. Maybe Clint Capella should still be on this roster. But from where they are, I think this trade could help the Houston Rockets get back on track. That's where I am with these things. Again, I think these are two of the most polarizing point guards of their era, and it will will be interesting to see if they both live up to their legacies and prove why they should make the Hall of Fame with these teams. Again, I think John Wall, if he wants to be a Hall of Famer, he's got to put up some major numbers with the Rockets and help them back on their winning track. And for Westbrook, I think he's a Hall of Famer no matter what, but this could only help cement his legacy if he could turn around the Washington Wizards. One thing's for sure, this is one of the most interesting trades in NBA history, and I will be keeping track of John Wall and Russell Westbrook all season long. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm Cam McKinney. There'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and iTunes, so please rate, review, and subscribe.